Life of Pi by Yann Martel. Life of Pi follows the extraordinary journey of P. Patel, a young Indian boy who survives a shipwreck in the Pacific Ocean. After the sinking of a cargo ship, Pi is left stranded on a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker, along with a few other animals that eventually die. Over the course of 227 days, Pi struggles to survive, using his knowledge of animals, religion, and human resilience. He forms an uneasy alliance with Richard Parker, and together they endure the vast ocean. The novel explores themes of survival, faith, and the nature of storytelling, leaving readers questioning what is true and what is imagined. Let's deep dive into the book. The Patel family and the zoo. The story begins with Paseen Molitor Patel, nicknamed Pi, growing up in Pondicherry, India, where his family owns a zoo. Pi has a deep interest in religion and spirituality, practicing Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam all at once. His father, a rationalist, teaches him the dangers of wild animals through a demonstration with a tiger. Pi's spiritual curiosity contrasts with his father's pragmatic views on life and science. This early section of the novel introduces Pi's character as a seeker of truth, while also highlighting the theme of the coexistence of belief and reason. The family eventually decides to emigrate to Canada, selling most of their animals and boarding a Japanese cargo ship called the Tsimtsum. The sinking of the Tsimtsum. During their journey across the Pacific, the Tsimtsum sinks in a violent storm, and Pi finds himself stranded on a lifeboat. Along with him are several surviving animals: a zebra, a hyena, an orangutan named Orange Juice, and a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. Pi is overwhelmed with fear and shock, and he quickly realizes the peril he is in. The shipwreck marks the beginning of Pi's struggle for survival in a vast and unforgiving ocean. As the days go by, the animal hierarchy is established. The hyena kills the zebra and Orange Juice, and eventually, Richard Parker kills the hyena, leaving only Pi and the tiger on the lifeboat. Surviving with Richard Parker. Pi, although terrified of Richard Parker, understands that his survival depends on establishing dominance over the tiger and coexisting with him. Using his knowledge of animal behavior, Pi trains Richard Parker by asserting himself as the alpha through feeding and conditioning. Pi constructs a raft to keep some distance from the lifeboat, but he soon realizes that his fate is intertwined with the tiger's. He begins fishing, collecting rainwater, and scavenging for food to sustain both himself and Richard Parker. Over time, Pi develops a complex relationship with the tiger, respecting and fearing him, while also depending on his presence for companionship and hope. Faith and survival. Alone at sea, Pi's faith becomes a crucial element of his survival. He prays to multiple gods, clinging to his religious beliefs for strength and hope in the face of adversity. The struggle for survival tests Pi's physical and spiritual endurance, but his unwavering faith helps him endure the immense loneliness and despair. He sees the ordeal as a test of his faith, continually reflecting on the presence of God in his life, even in such a dire situation. The novel explores how faith serves as a coping mechanism for Pi, allowing him to find meaning in his suffering and isolation. The Mysterious Island. After months of drifting, Pi and Richard Parker come across a mysterious floating island made entirely of algae. The island seems to offer salvation with fresh water, abundant food, and shelter. Pi eagerly explores the island, but soon discovers its dark secret. The island is carnivorous and consumes life at night. Realizing the danger, Pi leaves the island with Richard Parker, understanding that its apparent safety is deceptive. The island symbolizes the false promise of comfort that could lead to Pi's downfall if he abandons his will to keep moving. It reinforces the novel's themes of survival and the importance of vigilance, even in the face of temporary relief. The end of the journey. After 227 days at sea, Pi and Richard Parker finally reach the coast of Mexico. Exhausted and weak, Pi collapses on the beach, and Richard Parker disappears into the jungle without a backward glance, leaving Pi heartbroken at their abrupt separation. Pi is rescued by local villagers and taken to a hospital. His survival is miraculous, but his time at sea has left a profound mark on him. The bond between Pi and Richard Parker, built on fear, respect, and mutual need, is severed without any closure, highlighting the novel's meditation on the fleeting nature of relationships and the primal instincts that guide survival. The two stories. In the hospital, Pi is interviewed by two Japanese officials who want to know how the Tsimtsum sank. Pi tells them his incredible story of surviving with Richard Parker, but the officials are skeptical and ask for a more plausible explanation. Pi then tells a second version of the story, in which the animals are replaced by human survivors: his mother, a sailor, and a cruel cook who eventually turns violent. In this version, Pi survives by killing the cook after witnessing the deaths of his mother and the sailor. The officials are disturbed by this story, but choose to report Pi's original animal-filled version, as it is more comforting and miraculous. Storytelling and truth. The novel's ambiguous ending, with its two competing versions of the story, raises questions about the nature of truth and storytelling. Pi asks the Japanese officials and the readers which story they prefer: the fantastical tale with Richard Parker or the grim, realistic one. The novel suggests that both stories contain elements of truth, and that faith, imagination, and survival are deeply intertwined. Martel leaves it to the reader to decide whether one version is more truthful than the other, or whether the act of storytelling itself is a way to cope with trauma and give meaning to otherwise unbearable experiences. Themes of faith and reason. Throughout Life of Pi, the tension between faith and reason plays a central role. Pi's dual interest in religion and science shapes his worldview, as he draws upon both belief and logic to survive his ordeal. His time on the lifeboat with Richard Parker can be seen as a test of both his physical abilities and his spiritual resilience. The novel does not privilege one perspective over the other, instead presenting them as complementary forces in Pi's life. By the end, Pi's story serves as an exploration of how people use faith and storytelling to make sense of the world and their suffering. Ambiguous ending and interpretation. Life of Pi concludes with ambiguity, leaving readers to ponder the truth behind Pi's survival story. The novel plays with the idea that reality and imagination may blur in extreme circumstances. The story offers no definitive answers, instead inviting readers to reflect on the power of narrative, the role of belief, and the ways in which humans create meaning in the face of hardship. The novel's open-ended conclusion reinforces its central themes, allowing readers to interpret Pi's story through their own lenses of faith, doubt, and understanding. Let's meet together the main characters of the book. Pi Patel, whose full name is Piscine Molitor Patel, is the protagonist and narrator of Life of Pi. As a child, Pi is deeply spiritual, practicing Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam simultaneously, despite the confusion it causes among others. His faith and curiosity shape his worldview, and these qualities help him survive when he is stranded on a lifeboat in the Pacific Ocean. Pi's ingenuity, strong will, and knowledge of animal behavior allow him to coexist with the Bengal tiger, Richard Parker, during their 27 days at sea. Pi's character represents resilience, the power of belief, and the complexity of human survival instincts. Richard Parker is a Bengal tiger who becomes Pi's companion and adversary on the lifeboat. Initially a threat to Pi's survival, Richard Parker symbolizes both fear and primal instinct. Over time, Pi establishes dominance over the tiger and manages to coexist with him by training and feeding him, which creates a fragile but necessary bond between them. Richard Parker represents the animalistic side of human nature, the fight for survival, and the unpredictability of the natural world. His presence on the lifeboat gives Pi purpose, forcing him to focus on survival, both for himself and the tiger. The cook represents the darker aspects of humanity. A violent and ruthless man, he is responsible for killing both the sailor and Pai's mother in the second version of events. His character parallels the hyena from the animal version of the story, symbolizing brutality, selfishness, and the loss of morality in desperate situations. Pai ultimately kills the cook in order to survive, marking a turning point in his character and reflecting the harsh realities of human nature under extreme circumstances. Pai's mother, who appears in the second, more realistic version of Pai's story, is a symbol of love, protection, and sacrifice. She represents the orangutan, orange juice, in the animal story, who also displays maternal qualities. Pai's mother tries to shield him from the brutality of the cook, but she is ultimately killed in the struggle. Her death profoundly affects Pai, driving him to commit an act of violence in return. Through her character, the novel explores themes of parental sacrifice and the emotional toll of survival in extreme situations. The sailor is a character in the second version of Pai's story, paralleling the zebra in the animal narrative. Injured and vulnerable, the sailor represents innocence and helplessness, eventually falling victim to the cook's cruelty. His character highlights the vulnerability of humans in life or death situations, as well as the cruelty that can emerge in others when survival is at stake. The sailor's suffering emphasizes the harsh realities of survival, as his death becomes a point of reflection for Pai about the fragility of life and the moral compromises people make in desperate times. The Japanese investigators from the Maritime Department, Mr. Okamoto and Mr. Chiba, interview Pai after his rescue to determine the cause of the shipwreck. They are initially skeptical of Pai's fantastical story involving the animals, prompting him to offer a more realistic version. The investigators represent the need for factual understanding and logical explanations, contrasting with Pai's imaginative storytelling. They ultimately choose to accept Pai's animal-filled version of events, highlighting the novel's theme of subjective truth and the power of narrative to make sense of traumatic experiences. Let's explore together the main themes and concepts of the book. Faith and spirituality. One of the central themes of Life of Pai is faith, which Pai embraces throughout his life, practicing multiple religions simultaneously. His belief in Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam provides him with comfort, guidance, and a sense of purpose during his time at sea. Pai's spiritual beliefs help him endure unimaginable hardship as he turns to prayer and meditation to cope with his isolation and fear. The novel explores how faith can be both a source of strength and a lens through which people interpret the world, offering meaning in moments of suffering and uncertainty. Survival and resilience. Life of Pai is, at its core, a story about survival. Faced with the overwhelming challenge of surviving in a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger for 227 days, Pai draws on his intelligence, resourcefulness, and willpower to stay alive. His ability to adapt to his environment, train Richard Parker, and secure food and water demonstrates his resilience. The novel also highlights the psychological aspects of survival, as Pai's faith and storytelling become essential tools for maintaining hope and sanity. Martel presents survival as a complex interplay between physical endurance, mental fortitude, and spiritual belief. The nature of truth and storytelling. The novel's ending, with its two competing versions of Pai's story, raises questions about the nature of truth and the purpose of storytelling. By offering both a fantastical and a realistic version of events, Martel explores how people use stories to cope with trauma and make sense of their experiences. Pai's preferred version of the story, one filled with animals and miracles, reflects his belief in the power of narrative to provide comfort and meaning. The novel suggests that truth is not always objective, and that stories can be both a way to escape reality and a means of confronting it. The relationship between humans and animals. Throughout Life of Pai, the relationship between humans and animals is a central focus. Pi's knowledge of zoology and animal behavior plays a key role in his survival as he learns to coexist with Richard Parker. The tiger represents both a physical threat and a psychological challenge for Pi, forcing him to confront his own fears and instincts. At the same time, Richard Parker becomes Pi's companion, providing him with a sense of purpose and preventing him from succumbing to despair. The novel explores the blurred line between human and animal behavior, especially in extreme circumstances where survival instincts take precedence. The struggle for identity and self-discovery. Pi's journey is not only a physical survival story, but also one of self-discovery. Throughout the novel, Pi grapples with questions of identity, his name, his faith, and his sense of purpose. His time on the lifeboat forces him to confront the deepest aspects of his character, from his reliance on faith to his instincts for survival. The struggle with Richard Parker symbolizes Pi's internal conflict, as he must balance his human need for compassion with the primal instincts required to survive. By the end of the novel, Pi emerges as a changed person, shaped by his extraordinary journey and the lessons he has learned about himself. Let's talk about the author. Yann Martel, born in 1963 in Spain to Canadian parents, is an acclaimed Canadian author best known for his novel Life of Pi, which won the prestigious Man Booker Prize in 2002. Martel's writing often explores themes of spirituality, survival, and the nature of storytelling. His work blends realism with philosophical and metaphysical questions, inviting readers to consider multiple layers of meaning. In addition to Life of Pi, Martel has written other notable works such as Beatrice and Virgil and the High Mountains of Portugal. His ability to interweave imaginative narratives with deep existential themes has made him a celebrated figure in contemporary literature. Sincere thanks for watching. If you found this summary helpful, consider taking a moment to hit the subscribe button, like or share the video. If you have any feedbacks or book requests, make sure to leave a comment. Regardless, I wish you a great day.